Next, we head to London, where scores of protesters were arrested last night as anonymous protesters clashed with police outside of Buckingham Palace and the Houses of Parliament. Now, demonstrators assembled on Guy Fawkes Night, also known as Bonfire Night, as part of the Million Mask March, a day that was used by protesters around the world to express dissatisfaction with the ruling governments. Comedian Russell Brand also made an appearance, as you can see from this tweet. Brand attended a march outside London's Downing Street, part of a wider set of protests in the UK from people, frankly, fed up with austerity measures implemented by governments since the recession. Brand, who has recently denounced the British political ruling Conservative Party and other politicians, marched alongside the Green Member of Parliament, Caroline Lucas. Brand tweeted this: "Downing Street." And there you have the photo of the anonymous masks, the Guy Fawkes masks, of course. The tweet actually says, let me just get to it, "Whatever party they claim to represent in the day, at night they show their true colors and all go to the same party," using that hashtag Million Mask March. Of course, it's not the first time that Brand has gotten political. Earlier this week, he sat down with our very own HuffPost UK political editor, Mehdi Hassan, to talk about revolution and other things. Joining me now to discuss this is Mehdi himself. Mehdi, thanks for joining us. Mehdi, could you just speak up again? I don't know if I could hear you.
Can you hear me now? Hello, Ahmed.
There we go. Thanks a lot. All right, so Mehdi, let's first talk about the march in London. What happened at Buckingham Palace, and could these sorts of events stir public ire in a way that might be reminiscent of the 2011 London riots?
It's a good question. I'm not sure they will. I think there have been these sporadic protests over the last 3 years against austerity. We had a very big march organised by the trade unions a couple of years ago. But the austerity protests in the UK have never really reached the level as we've seen in other countries like France. The British public really don't have a tradition of taking to the streets in the same way that some of our continental cousins do. And a lot of people on the left here have been frustrated that we haven't had the kind of protests against austerity that some thought we might have, given the level of spending cuts, given the level of unemployment, given the fact there are 1 million young people out of work in this country. You mentioned the riots of 2011. I mean, just to put it in context, last night in London, I think there were 11 arrests made. In 2011, there were 3,000 arrests made and 5 lives lost. So it was nowhere near that level last night. A lot of it was, fireworks, fun, Guy Fawkes Night. A lot of it was serious stuff about austerity, corruption, the surveillance state. This was going on in Japan, in Australia, in New Zealand, and in the UK and elsewhere around the world. But it's not on that level yet.
And Mehdi, when you were comparing, the reaction, if you will, or the turnout as compared to continental Europe, often people make those same comparisons when referring to the Occupy Wall Street movement here in the US, how the crackdown essentially shut it down. Do you think that this is a product of just the culture here and perhaps in England or the UK, or do you think it has to do with the police and the way police react as compared with continental Europe, for example?
It's a very good question. I think it's a mix of the two, actually. I think there definitely is a cultural angle. I can't speak for the Americans, but here in Britain, we've always, the British public, the kind of people who will try and form an orderly queue wherever necessary, doesn't go crazy in the same way that some of our continental cousins do. But yes, you're right. The increase in kind of riot-type police who appear at any kind of public protest now makes it much harder for young people in particular to protest peacefully. It always ratchets up the prospect of violence. We saw that with the protest by students here in 2010 against tuition fees, against the raising of fees by this government. There was a lot of violence. One protester was famously hit in the head, almost got brain damage by a police officer. So yes, I think you're right. I think it's become very hard to express dissent in any other kind of way which doesn't result in a police crackdown, and people therefore are seething below the surface. That doesn't mean people aren't angry.
Right.
It just means they're not expressing it in the way that some of us might expect.